Welcome to NewYorkBIO's virtual breakfast series, a digital program started in 2020 featuring fireside chats with leaders from across the healthcare spectrum. This week's guest is Olivia Tournay Flatto, the president of the Pershing Square Foundation and the co-founder of the Pershing Square Sohn Cancer Research Alliance.
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Hawks-Bland, and I'm the CEO at NewYorkBIO. We are thrilled to have Olivia Tournay Flatto with us today. She runs the Pershing Square Foundation, and we're going to learn about a lot of things that they've been working on. For those of you who are interested in Zoom background curation, behind me, have their amazing book that they just issued this holiday about all of the work that they do globally. It's amazing. So as we talk to Olivia and you learn more about the amazing work that they've done over the past decade, I hope you'll follow up and take a look at their website and learn more about the good work that they've done. Thank you to TriNet for being our sponsor for these next 4 weeks. NewYorkBIO is kicking off a new savings program partnership with TriNet. So you'll hear more about that in the coming weeks. So we're thrilled to welcome them into the NewYorkBIO family of companies that we work with. With that, I will, sorry, I almost forgot. It's been a few weeks since we've done this. We have the housekeeping. So at the bottom of your screen, we have a Q&A or a chat feature. Ask your questions. And as we talk to Olivia, we will get to those in due time. So without further ado, we'll turn it over to Derek to introduce Olivia, and then we'll get chatting. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Olivia. And very happy to have you here as our first guest to kick off 2021. So we usually tend to start with a little bit of background. And as an interesting story, when we were first introduced, we were introduced by an investor friend of mine who characterized you as the best person he has ever worked with in early stage oncology research, which was both flattering and I think true. So
daunting.
So yeah, no pressure. But I thought it would be interesting to talk a little bit about how you started in oncology and really what brought you up to the Pershing Square Foundation.
Sure. Well, I'm happy to see you, Derek and Jennifer. I don't see anyone else, but I'm looking forward to connecting with everyone. I know that during this time, usually Derek and I are at JP Morgan conference, meeting each other in meetings and in the halls, which hopefully we'll do soon again. I think that, when I think about the journey, and you're asking me how I came to oncology and then the Pershing Square Foundation, I think it was a series of decisions that happened at a specific point in time. And then I decided that that was going to be the best course for me. But I started my life, and I'm here now in the south of France. And I'm here because of family reason. And I'm French, as you can hear. As my son said, I never shed my accent. But I was interested in marine biology, actually. And I wanted to study the oceans and understanding better, this amazing world that we have under the sea. And then a really important person in my life, somebody named Hilary Koprovsky, who was a very well-renowned immunologist and also one of the co-founder of the polio vaccine with Salk and Sabin, told me that, it was very direct. And he said, Olivia, stop with this nonsense. This was 30 years ago. You have to go into molecular biology. And then you can do anything you want, but you have to start at the level of the nucleus and the DNA. And here I am going to Philadelphia and working at the Wistar Institute and working on regulation of gene expression. It was a big hot topic at the time, regulation of transcriptional factors and so on. So I started doing PCR in water bath that you had to move the tubes. That shows how long ago it was. Yeah, you must remember that.
Yep.
And I think that we talk always about how philanthropy and science has a lot in common. I think that I always wanted to help. At 17, I wanted to bring medicine to Africa, and I was always interested in helping the world. And becoming an oncologist and a cancer researcher became my life passion, and understanding what happens at the level of the cell and understanding all these molecular mechanisms of cell differentiation, and afterwards working at the Wistar Institute with Frank Rauscher and Robert Ben-Ezra at Sloan Kettering, working on helix loop helix protein and ID1 differentiation. It was really important for me to understand and be part of something that nobody else had done. It's quite amazing. And in what I do now, I'm able to do the same thing. And I was asked a couple of years ago to join the board of the Pershing Square Foundation. The foundation is now almost 13 years old. And one thing led to another. And with my interest in my work in science, and especially in cancer, I thought of, how do we think about being a director of a lab and fund projects that would be really interesting. So I put the skills that I learned at the bench towards philanthropy.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question.
It's close, but it gets the ball rolling. So on a little bit more there, when people Google Pershing Square, they're gonna come up with Bill Ackman, and they're probably going to take a little while to get to oncology and what the foundation does. So can you give a little bit of background on really where the foundation came from and what kind of some of the driving principles were behind it?
Yes. So, philanthropy, especially when you come from France, philanthropy is so strong in the US, and you have many family foundations that have been really founded by people who have created amount of wealth, and they want actually to make sure they can actually have an impact, societal impact. And the foundation started 13 years ago with an interest in being philanthropist, but more in an organized fashion. And so I think that at that time, before I knew Bill 27 years ago, and before he started becoming, the person he is now, and he was always philanthropic. He always gave to a lot of organizations and had a lot of empathy for what he saw around him. And when he started the foundation, we started putting all together, the board of the foundation, the founders, and our team, a structure around, what is it that we want to start with? And at the beginning, it was much more organic. We like this program in education, this program in healthcare was really interesting, this program in social justice was really interesting. And then one thing led to another, and we started implementing a stronger and more robust program in medical research. And we started with cancer. And that was because there were several people on the board that obviously were affected. And we felt that with the amount of money that we wanted to give at that time, we could follow one of the core principles of the foundation, which is fund talented individuals at an early stage in their career and give them the tools to actually pursue bold ideas that traditional type of funding would not actually grant them the money to do so. And I think that one of the other things that we felt we could do at that time, and with my background and my experience, is to give them also access to not only the funding that is key, but also an access to a community of mentors, scientists, leaders in philanthropy, captains of the industry, biotech executives, pharma executives, and there's nothing better than New York to create an ecosystem like that.
Yep.
No,
absolutely.
That answers your question there.
It does. It does. I mean, I think one of the biggest points that you hit on is really how philanthropy has changed over time. And, I guess a lot of this probably started with Michael Milken and the Prostate Cancer Foundation and the Milken Institute and the Faster Cures Initiative, where, they took a different kind of data-driven approach to funding these ideas that were really going to potentially lead to breakthroughs for patients. And I think one of the things that we've seen over time is that there are many ways to focus and harness that power on a particular problem. And, you hit on something that was perfect here, because you're talking about these young investigators, you're talking about breakthrough ideas. And the other thing that you mentioned was collaboration, right? And giving them the tools early on in their career to really shape something big. And, that really connects you in a lot of ways to the ecosystem in a way that philanthropy wasn't always connected that way.
Yeah, and when you mention actually, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna let you go. So one of the things that I would ask you about is, how did that evolve organically? Did you realize as you were starting that that say connections to industry or connections to finance or other people within that ecosystem would be a big driver of success, or is it something where you realized, after you were funding these projects that, oh gosh, what this person really needs to do is to actually connect to people downstream?
No, we actually when I started to build the prize, it was with the specific idea in mind to actually build something outside just only funding. Organically, all of us in our life meet people that we help sporadically. And I felt like I was doing this more and more in a natural way, connecting this with this one and saying you should speak to this one. And Derek and Jennifer, I know you do that all the time, and New York Bio is at the epicenter of this kind of work. And I think this is actually wonderful because there's nothing better than building a strong network. And so I felt very early on that this was crucial for their growth and their exposure to connect with people that didn't have access to. There's nothing better than a scientist sitting next to a business leader or a philanthropist or a Nobel Prize winner. I think that scientists at the bench have led until now, things have changed, but much more of an isolated kind of life where it's more of a lonely work at your bench and with the team around you or the labs that are next to you or your institution. Now this is obviously changing, and COVID has shown us how this is. Felt it was important to put those people together and make sure that they can learn from each other. And also, when you're a philanthropist and you give money away, you actually want to see the people that you help. And the connection between the actual individuals who give the funding and the scientists is very important for their actually mutual growth. And I think that, as you know, both of you know so well, New York has been positioned in an incredible way now to create such a bio hub of leaders in the field, and philanthropy can play a role in fostering those collaborations. Then we wanted to be part of that.
And don't you think that obviously part of your mission is like you said, to give away funding, but it's also to encourage success.
Yep.
Oh, sorry. We gotta, Olivia.
No, I think there's a delay in my internet. Are you hearing me okay?
Okay.
Have you lost me?
Yep.
You're back. You're back. No,
You're back. You froze for a second.
Obviously, like part of your mission is to provide funding, but it's to also foster success in the things that you are interested in growing. And by putting together the funding with the people, when these researchers have been, heads down, trying to work on their basic research, that really elevates not only the potential for the impact of what you're doing, but also, frankly, for patients down the road.
Yep.
Exactly. And I think that if both cultures and both institutions can understand better the inner work of everything is very different in both of these worlds, right? If they can understand how this works, then we're in a better position to help. And I thought that this was going to be interesting to mix this group of people that don't necessarily know what a graduate student does and the process of graduate school, postdoc, jargon like PI or technician in the lab. It was not obvious at first, and now it's becoming more important, and more so now, obviously, when we are in this health crisis.
Right.
Yeah. So if you look back, are there particular instances where you felt you kind of took a great step in that direction and it worked out fantastically? So there are kind of success stories that you look at over the first 13 years and really where you saw something as a turning point that you could emulate with other founders and other funders.
Right. Well, that's a great question that everyone in the foundation world always, want to really answer very well. I think that and say, yes, we did great. I think there are different types of success. And I think they are incremental successes. They are also networking success. There are also obviously discoveries that have been made. And because of the breadth of our portfolio, we've had impact in different areas. We have funded social entrepreneurs on the ground in Africa, helping farmers to become independent by giving them financial tools and seeds. And we have done also social justice work and helping the system to have specific portal and data analysis to find out how different areas are doing better in terms of justice. And in terms of the Cancer Prize, we've had a lot of really incredible success with our scientists. Some of them have started their own companies. We have now a portfolio of 46 grantees. About 13 of them are in the process of starting their own companies. And we've also started to help them give seed funding to help them with their companies, which is also another thing that we have started doing. And we have also helped them to connect with each other and collaborate. And of course, there have been about 175 publications coming out of our funding. And we also measure success because they have been able to leverage, I think, over 56 million in additional grants directly from the funding that we initiated. So I think I can't say that somebody has discovered something incredible, but I think they are all discovering incredible things from, work at Sloan Kettering in how to localize proteins in cancer cell, from understanding how the immune system in the guts is actually promoting cancer, colorectal cancer, from, I can just go on and on. Their work is amazing. And I think that will be probably for another topic, because we can actually talk about this for a long time. Yeah. But I think you can look at our website and see all the amazing people that we also provide interviews, and we have them speak about their work. So hopefully this can be actually inspiring other students or others to join the field also of research.
Yep. So in thinking back a little bit, I love that you have progressed into thinking about seed funding for early stage ventures, because I think for New York City, for a long time, it was one of the limiting factors in terms of actually getting a company off the ground, getting really kind of the kernel and the team together. So when you first started doing that, did you find that you had to go and socialize these deals in and around the venture community? Did you kind of have to play that initial role of, bringing other funders to the table and thinking about how to get the actual ventures put together? What was that transition like for the fund? Did you have to go and kind of socialize it both internally and externally to know there was really something there to play that early stage kind of investor role as opposed to philanthropic funding?
Yes, so I think a combination of all of these, Derek, as you can imagine. I think that one of the things that was also very important on the ground is that other foundations were thinking like us. So we had other philanthropic partners, and some of them actually, with some of them, we share the same grantees. They funded them earlier, we funded them a little later, and then so on. So it's all part of the same ecosystem. So we shared a lot of those grantees together, and we were able to actually pull our resources together to think about who we could introduce them to, what kind of funding was actually appropriate at the stage where their company was, and really thinking in terms of philanthropic investments. If philanthropy and for-profit investment through the foundation can actually help them de-risk some of this early stage for their companies, I think that's something, a soft spot where we want to be able to actually invest. And a lot of those things happen at first organically. You were just talking to our community of scientists. We're putting them together. We're bringing friends. We invited scientists from our board and other investors to be around them and give them feedback of how they build their deck, what they need to do. And this became much more of a family reunion where we would be in the office and they would actually get our feedback. And I think a lot of the academic scientists do not necessarily know how to present to the business community and do not know how to say, you know, I have raised so much money in grants, I have done this. They don't necessarily do that. So I think it was important to see what was the business model, what is it that they wanted to achieve, where was the intellectual property, and we were able to bring people around them to help them think about this.
Yep. And as you said
And
before, you usually.
I know. Yeah, I just want to add one thing also, that as you know, this is never something that is done alone with, you know, we have many partners, legal partners, we have the business world around us that can help us, and we have a lot of friends in the community. And I have also an incredible team, and I think they're on the call. Christy Barrow, Diana Wong, Glenn Ellington, they're wonderful. So they do an amazing job.
I can attest to how wonderful they are.
No, they're fantastic. So one of the things that you mentioned before, and I think it's important to note, is that you tend to work with scientists early in their career and really give them kind of the tools to do a little bit more groundbreaking work, maybe something that, you know, the NIH may be a little too conservative to look at. But I imagine that you provide, you know, mentorship and, you know, guidance, you know, at this early point in their career in helping them kind of take the next step. So can you talk a little bit about what kind of things you look for in the people that you are investing in, and what kind of things that you look to kind of help them do as they move along in their career?
Yes, happy to. So when the prize started, one of the things that we wanted to do is build a committee around them, and it was important to build a very strong board and a vetting process that would engage the community at first to discuss the new ideas that were coming through this pipeline of young scientists, and also to actually get them engaged and discuss the ideas with the scientists that we're presenting. The word innovation is something that is being used very often, but we were really looking at two important things. We were looking at the individual, the quality of the individual, his training, his thinking, his writing, and also if the project was very bold, didn't have necessarily a lot of funding, maybe sometimes not, but we knew that the individual was going to be able to perform. And if one person could do the work, it was going to be him, or he would find actually the right partners to do so. And also to think about the project, we always think if this is something that looks like an R1 and that the NIH will fund, we are not interested. So we have a very stringent review process where we receive every year, and this is from 11 institutions around New York area. We've added Princeton and Yale last year. And we receive about 70 applications per year. We have a first vetting and triage, and we go down to about 25. And those 25 full-length proposals are actually dispatched to 3 reviewers. And you can look at our board, and it's an incredible board of really incredible scientists. And then we have conversation and discuss the scoring. And then 12 finalists come and present to the board in April. And usually one of our prize advisory board member will actually chair the board. So last year we had it was Bruce Stillman. It was the first year we did it virtually. And then we had Jim Rothman a year, Rick Lifton, Craig Thompson. This year it will be Michael Dolston, who is the head of global R&D at Pfizer. Yes, he's on our board. And I think that, this is also giving every time a different atmosphere to the board, and the exchanges are really very lively. We give them 7 minutes to present, and then within 20 minutes, we have, we discuss and have questions for them. And we also have guest reviewers among the first cohorts of our prize. The 2014, 15, and 16 have started reviewing for us and are part of the group also, which make it
Yep.
even more interesting for them. Don't know if that answered your question.
It does a little bit, right? And you know, you kind of touched on it at the end, where now it's interesting now because now you're starting to see, you know, the secondary effects of, you know, folks that you funded in 2014, 15, 16, staying engaged with the foundation and actually bringing, you know, some of their learnings and some of their growth as either reviewers or I would imagine as mentors as well. So one of the things that I would ask is that, you know, have you found that, you know, the types of people that you are funding are either a little more aware or, you know, a little more in tune with things like company creation and entrepreneurship and kind of translational research than they were when you first started? Because it feels like there's much more of a groundswell of innovation and development and external thinking in academic research, certainly within most of the medical institutions.
That's a question for you, Derek. You know better than I do.
Well, I know what I would say. I want to hear what you say.
Okay,
nobody's here to listen to me.
Yeah. We hear Derek all the time.
So I'll start, and please, Derek, fill in because you know this even better than I do. I think that, you know, obviously we have been able to, so the beauty about the foundation is it's not only philanthropy, right? It's business, it's access to biotech. We have a lot of friends who come together and like to be together, and I think like the conversation that we have around the table. And so this group came in and we fund them, and then they know they can turn to us. So we feel like, you know, the mothership sometimes where they come to us and they can actually feel safe because we're a foundation, right? And so they feel safe, they feel they can talk to us, and they know we have their back. I mean, we want to help them. That's what we do, right?
Yeah.
And we have no other agenda than helping them. And so we are almost Switzerland for them. And so we actually give them connection that would be appropriate for their work, the science that would be actually interesting for them to collaborate with, the scientists that would help them. We set up a conversation with others. Sometimes we participate, sometimes we don't. We just get feedback. And we let this evolve organically. And then if they come back to us and say, we haven't found what we wanted, we need this and that, we are at that time there also to continue the conversation. It is to go back to their knowledge about business. I think that there has been really a wonderful movement in New York City in terms of technology transfer. The teams are superb. And I think that I've helped their scientists also much better than probably before, understanding what the incentives are and taking care of them much better, although nothing is ever perfect. But I think that one of the things that is that we see is much more collaboration, much more alignment of incentive, and how do you see that? I want to see, because you are also at the heart of that. What do you see?
Well, you know, I've seen over the last, I would say over the last 10 years, that there's been a pretty big shift in the pendulum to companies that are formed out of the labs of particular investigators that are really driven by the investigator themselves, more so than a team that comes in and then goes and looks for funding. I found that the PIs and the folks within their lab are much, much stronger drivers of really the translational and commercializable effects of that. So, you know, I think putting, you know, the PI at the center of this and kind of giving them all those resources, I think is incredibly valuable. I think about folks in New York like Chris Mason, who have been able to start multiple companies and who have been, you know, really, you know, very, very savvy with who and how they've connected to things and how things come out of their lab. And I think that's starting to become the norm rather than the exception. I think when investigators are younger now, I think they know that those options exist more so than, say, 10 or 15 years ago when entrepreneurship and company creation was a bit more of a black box. I think in general, the baseline has risen, and I think there's a better amount of education across the board on what that means and how ideas come out in terms of company formation.
Well, and don't you think the schools
Totally
are
agree with
doing a
that.
better job too? I mean, you see Columbia teaching this amazing entrepreneurship sort of program, right? That goes along with the other work that they're doing at the bench. And
Mhm.
the schools are making an effort to be able
Mhm.
Yes.
to tell a scientist this is an option for you. Academia isn't your only path forward,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
That's a very good
I think.
point. Something that was missing for a long time, and as well. Go ahead, Derek.
Oh, I was going to say that in addition, they're now putting programs together with entrepreneurs and residents, and again, giving academics more resources in this regard. So we actually had a good related question here from David Kalo, which is, what could folks at either the city, state, or U.S. level do to better help innovation in this realm? Right. So from where you sit, do you see any ways that either the city or the state could be complementary to the work that you're doing and the work that others are doing to kind of help lift everyone up a bit more?
Well, I think that's a very good question. I think that the collaboration between non-for-profit and the city has also begun much more than it had in the past. And you probably can see that with your organization. I think that there's a lot of efforts that can be made. I mean, obviously, one of the things that foundation can do very well is being very fast and flexible. We don't need multi-layers of decision making that could take, we pride ourselves on seeing somebody and saying, we want to fund you. So that's just obviously a little different. But I think that bringing people together, I mean, obviously this happens at the level of people that get along and respect each other. We can actually start thinking about what are the criteria, what is the landscape, who funds what, and have much more of a database of who does what, who funds what are who can actually fill what purpose. And the communication could be better, obviously, and maybe have much more roundtable where people would be meeting and discussing. That would be great. But I think this also with the government happens a little differently because of different political view. People change, and so 3 or 4 years later you have somebody else, but that's okay too. So it could be really interesting to create those kind of that would actually brainstorm and think about it. I think there are many ways to address this, obviously through funding, through thinking, through inviting the guest speakers that would be actually elevating the conversation and identifying talent. I think we are all for that. We don't want also to add too much meetings and brainstorming session to people that actually are so busy.
Yeah, it's a balance.
Oh yeah, let me ask you about this, because I know that the Pershing Square Foundation has done a lot of work in education. And one thing that we've been talking about more lately, and New York Bio is putting together a task force to work on equity, diversity, and inclusion, is how we encourage education in the early stages, right? Even elementary, middle school, for communities that may not have seen science as an option for them for careers. Like what work have you all done, and what do you think we can do going forward that could help with that?
Yeah, so it's something obviously that we are discussing a lot internally for the past year, and we're discussing this with other foundations too. And if you think about the science world, obviously this is not a very diverse group of people, and obviously also more male than female. I think that one of the things that we have been thinking internally about is really helping institutions to have a vetting process and access to schools and programs that would allow communities that don't necessarily have the same access to labs and do research in the summer to inspire them and have much more of a coordinated effort in terms of who spends what in which lab. I think we always go towards the same pipeline, the same people, and we always have our network, but how do we actually reach out more at large to the community? We do a lot of work with the Robin Hood Foundation, and they would be ideal partners for us to think about working together to actually bring more diversity to the community, create special programs. And that's also obviously a concerted effort in New York City, because we're talking about Robin Hood, where also the government and the local community. But that's feasible to implement. I think we just have to get organized, and we've been talking about this internally as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. I actually met the first person that I've ever met that works at Robin Hood at a Pershing Square dinner. So look, you're living your connections. You're
living the dream.
Well, I'm glad. We'll have to do more of that when we can all get together very soon.
Yeah. The system works, QED. So we had a good question from Hans Christinger about, any lessons that we could potentially learn from either Biotech France or the way that things work in France in terms of, is there anything that France does particularly well that you think we could potentially adopt some of those principles, or is it something where it's a different ecosystem and it's kind of been optimized for the way that things work?
So it's a good question. I would say two things. I don't spend as much time in France in the biotech world than I do in the US, but I do know a lot of the some of the funders in France and VCs and companies like Sophie Nova or Merieux, or people of that that have very big funders here and have created incredible companies and have very good taste in what they invest in. The system here doesn't have the same flow of private capital than you have in the US.
right.
And it's concentrated among a few people, and the government still has a big role. Think about, my connection unstable.
You're okay. It's a little choppy, but you're okay.
Oh, all right. Wanted to say that in terms of now, as we see a new variant arising in COVID and how the need to actually reach out to different cultures and countries, I would say that, France and the whole world, I feel like, we are certainly with France and the US and the whole world building bridges rather than walls. And I think that this is something that, is going to be not as easy to differentiate. But France and the biotech community, I know from a fact that they are trying to emulate what they see in the US.
Okay, well, that's flattering from the US side. And I think that one of the big challenges is that, in a lot of ways, the US it's large, it's diverse, and healthcare in Washington is different than healthcare in Arkansas, is different than healthcare in New York. And, the US has the challenge of needing to cover all of those things and support really a much wider span of research, of patients, of science. In a lot of ways, it's a good problem to have because we have innovation everywhere, which is terrific. And, to follow on that,
Derek, one of the things I'd like to add also is the system of education in France and the US is very different. The system of education in France is really geared towards becoming an engineer and becoming a specialist. In France, you don't speak in school, you don't say anything unless you are 99% sure of what you say. When I was a graduate student at Penn, University of Pennsylvania, I remember one of the first things is that people were speaking just off the cuff, saying things. The teacher was saying, "This is such a wonderful idea," and I was thinking, "Really?" But I think that there's a sense of self-confidence that is given to the US system, and I might be just saying something really that's going to be not so good, but I think there's a sense of confidence in the US system where people make you feel that you're not 99% ready like in France, but you can still do things if you're at 65, 70%, and the rest will come. So there is more, you think in terms of entrepreneur, which is a French word, but I have found Americans and my stay in the US have been surrounded with people who are far more entrepreneurial because they are not afraid of failure the way European system or the French system is actually shaping them to be.
I never thought of that, but you're right. I mean, like that's sort of one of our tenets, right? Is we may not get it right the first time, but we always feel like we have the option to go a second time and to learn from the mistakes we make.
Right. The other
sort of
thing
daily
is
life
that
in my household.
yeah. Well, the other thing is that when a challenge pops up, people can rise to it. And one of the things that we talked about before this meeting was how a number of your researchers, basically turned and pivoted to COVID when the challenge hit. So I'd be really interested to hear a little bit about, either how you have supported those researchers or really what some of those decision making seem like, because if you think about it, if you're doing immunology and cancer, and then you have this massive challenge from COVID-19, that expertise is highly transferable.
Exactly. And one of the things that happened just the first 2 months into this crisis, we realized that we had to act like a special force. And we had like a FEMA kind of force, getting emergency, and we had access to community. We had a community of incredible scientists on our board and through our network who were actually doing incredible work, and actually we're doing findings from the cancer world that could be really helpful for the SARS-CoV-2 infection. So we put out an RFP and we deployed $3 million to 19 grants very quickly. It took us 4 weeks. And again, thanks to my team again.
Wow.
We actually deployed the $3 million and the money was out in a little more than 4 weeks. From actually different research from making synthetic lungs on microchips, to understanding the structure of the RNA virus, to actually understanding sex-biased response to COVID, also genetic disposition to COVID, to making lungs organoids. I mean, we funded also the automated RT-PCR testing. We were part also of this initial funding for the city. We did a lot of interesting, because the whole community of cancer researchers is systems biologists, immunologists, biochemists, chemists, and this whole network was there working on COVID. And it was just very important to leverage this initial group.
Yeah.
And we hosted also in April the first COVID-19 conversation with all the different leaders of the academic institutions and cancer research institutions in New York to discuss their COVID-19 response and also the impact that it has on cancer patients and the findings that could be actually applied to the COVID infection. So I think that was all, it's all about what is it that others do? What is it that you can do with the community? I think when the crisis happened, one of the things that we did at first was to really help our partners on the ground, not discover new people at that time, something that we do usually, because in some ways we are like a talent agency trying to find people we just said, okay, now we need to fund our partners, our grantees need help. We need to use this community to actually bring them together and foster more than ever collaboration. And this is what happened. I'm not saying we were part of that. It was already in the making, but it actually facilitate this even more with funding and connections than we were ready to do it.
Yep. Well, I think one of the big things that we noticed around the community was really that the community snapped right into place and said, we need to talk about this, we need to share expertise. And you saw these little communities popped up. The New York Genome Center did one, I think, every Monday or every other Monday throughout the pandemic. I was fortunate enough to be on some of the stuff that Columbia's team was putting together with David Ho and their antibody discovery thing. And I think you saw it everywhere. The entire scientific world stood on its head and said, this is important. We need to focus on this right now. And the machinery snapped into place. And one of the big things that resonated from before is, it's challenging for governments and other institutions to be fast. But institutions like yours and others within the scientific machinery turned on a dime. I think it's amazing that you could deploy that you could fund 19 grants in a month is almost mind-boggling, right? It's amazingly quick. But you realize that speed is of the essence, because you have to do this now. It gives an immediacy that isn't always there. And to pivot back to oncology and to patients, in a sense, I think one of the things that's going to last beyond COVID is almost more of a sense of immediacy on behalf of the patients, right? Folks that are in treatment now, folks that are diagnosed with cancer, there is an immediacy to that. And I think now people may be a little bit more in tune with the fact that healthcare doesn't stop and patients don't stop. And I think it gives a little bit more of an onus for people to really, I think, drive a little harder towards, how do we run the killer experiment? How do we get this to the next stage of where it can possibly get to a patient? It feels like a lot of this has brought the patient back into the central focus of what people are really thinking about.
I agree with you. And I think that the community coming together at all levels around the patient, I think this has been at the forefront and center, and thinking about the community of scientists in a way that we always, knowing what they do and being in the field, we obviously think of them as our heroes. But every day it's been a real privilege to work with every one of the scientists that we know, and knowing them already and knowing how dedicated they are. I think it's been a great honor. And if we can help this world in any way, I think that's what we want to continue doing.
Yeah. So when you look at say the next 5 to 10 years, how do you approach some of kind of the biggest challenges that we see? And I would frame it in two ways. I would think about solid tumors, for one, for which we've had a very difficult time unlocking the biology and therapeutic approaches that would work on solid tumors. And the second would be, how do you think about things like GRAIL or earlier detection that may almost stand the way that we look at diagnosis and treatment on its head a little bit? So how do you think about those two things in terms of where the cancer field is headed?
Yeah, so I agree with you. Solid tumors, obviously, and liquid biopsy and early detection. I think we have, even among our grantees, people who are working in that field with really impressive technology and rapidity, and coming from different institutions. So I think that we are very well on our way to improve our detection. I think one of the things that I would add, Derek, to this is also finding new tools to do research. I think we have to graduate from the mouse, and I think it's wonderful. I think we've had a lot of really interesting discoveries, but during our last retreat in October, where some of our prize winners and their work to our community, we had a panel on organoids where we invited Hans Clevers, and David Trevisan was there. And Ali Brinvelu, and we and Carla Kim, and we had an amazing panel where this very topic was brought up. I think it's a wonderful tool. I think we have to think about more, and I think that this is something that I'd like to focus on in the future. If I think about the next 5-10 years of the Foundation, and not only for Eye Cancer Prize, but for Eye Cancer Prize, I think we'll continue funding, the way we've been funding, and always question if what we're doing is the right thing at the right time. And and testing the landscape and see what is needed. I think that's one of the things that we do regularly. But we are now also thinking about the brain and how we could be helping neurodegenerative disease, and think about what's next for us as a foundation. I think one of the lessons that I have learned being a scientist and being at the bench is that you can just think about a model and you can apply that model to different fields. That's why I feel, that even though we might just go into the environment, we can apply the same lessons that we learned from the Cancer Prize and other types of funding we've done in the past and apply them to the next field of interest. And more than ever, I think we've been actually confronted to the fact that everything we do is related in the environment, in health, at the cellular level. I mean, I think that we can, and we are all linked. So I think that more than ever, we know that everything has an impact on the next, the next sphere, next us.
Right.
Well, I mean, you can take you can take the steps from cancer to COVID-19, as well as you can take them to neurodegeneration, inflammation, autoimmune diseases, rare diseases. The expertise in one field, there are lessons to be learned in several other ones. So,
and Derek, to your point, is the idea of breaking the silos, right? I mean, the expertise in all these different fields, we are going to break the silos, bring the brain with the cancer field, and create a community of people that are just more and more need to be together and learn from each other.
Yeah, cross-pollination.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and it takes external forces like Pershing Square, like a New York Bio, bring these together, because historically they've been head down doing the research. That's where their life's work is. But we have to cross-pollinate, and I think COVID sort of helped us think about, we were already headed there, but it also helped us think about things differently, because we all of a sudden, we had to look at things that have been used in the past for non-infectious disease and figure out how to sort of repurpose it and make it work to help us now.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
Yeah, so you mentioned tools companies, and I think there's also been there's been a heavier focus on data and algorithmic approaches for either discovery or systems biology. So I would ask you, where do you think we are in terms of, I will say, in silico modeling of biology, and what kind of steps that AI needs to be able to take to I would say drive new biological discoveries? I think there's been an immense amount of capital put forward into AI. I think, in terms of the mathematics and the algorithms, there's been an immense amount of work put into those. Do you think we're really at the place now that, it's ready to make a huge impact, or do you really think there are other, biological underpinnings that still need to put under that algorithmic foundation that will make it ready for prime time, so to speak?
Another question where I would love to hear your response, Derek, but I will start.
He's not allowed.
Tell you what, when you, Olivia, when you and Pershing Square start a webinar series, I will be very happy to be your guest and flip this interview around. Sign me up.
Actually, we've been thinking about starting a podcast with our Cancer Prize winners. Okay, so yes. I mean, it's not a yes or no answer. It's there's still a tremendous need for basic understanding of how things work, right? We still need to understand basic mechanisms. We still need to do that type of research. That type of research now we are able to do it in many different cells. We can clone many different cells at the same time, understanding the DNA, the genomic, the epigenomic, everything that can do with one cell, we can do it in many different cells in the same time, many different patients. This is generating a tremendous amount of data, obviously, that we can analyze much better than we could ever before. I mean, we have amazing tools. AI is clearly has been amazing to generate data for the patient in precision medicine, etc. Are we there yet? I don't think so, but we will. I'm sure we will, and we will get even better. I think that for now, I am personally very interested in funding systems biology and circuits, but not only. I think this has to be done in collaboration with other type of research. And we have amazing systems biologists, we have amazing computational biologists, and this is all incredibly important, but not at the expense of understanding the basic biology. And that's also applicable to the brain, where we have an emphasis on the circuit biology and the networks all at once. But there are still basic things that we do need to understand. So I think that we have made incredible progress. There's still a lot to do.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you very much on the need for kind of better information on the systems biology front. I think that's one of the next frontiers, and the fact that you and the foundation are really kind of driving those discoveries at the basic science level, I think is important. Really, it's the most important piece of the pyramid, because if those algorithms are standing on good data, they can be impactful. If they are not standing on good data, then the whole game is lost. So, I would leave this with a final question on, if you could do one thing over the next, say, 12 months to kind of bring things forward back in the oncology space, and you can kind of push, certain ideas out to the community, what are some of the things immediately that you would want the community to recognize about, some of the folks that you're working with now?
Woo. That's a good question. I'm not sure I can answer that right away. I think that there are many things I'd like to do. I think 12 months might be too short, but I think that from where I sit and the team at the foundation, I think we want to continue doing what we've been doing, which is fund incredible innovators and scientists, bring them together, understand what the needs are, who is doing incredibly innovative work, who are we going to give the funding to, knowing that so many good people are out there that we cannot fund, always feeling that we have not enough funding to fund all these incredible people, supporting the science, supporting the community, being a good citizen. And I think that trying to make sure that we push the research forward for all of our scientists. I think everybody is doing something from a different angle, could be in immunotherapy, or more at the genetic level, or more thinking about microbiome related. I think that we're lucky to be working with them, and I think that I have an incredible job. So I will make sure that we have the scientists at the forefront of everything we do more in the future. So if I can push this agenda forward, I would love to.
Yeah.
Olivia,
where are you in the cycle? Are the awards being announced soon, or are you now looking for new awardees?
No, we're just in the process of, we have invited about 25, Christy know exactly number, 25, 26 people to actually, scientists to give a full-length proposal, and we are going, she says 29, good. 29. Thanks, Christy. 29 to actually give us the full-length proposals, and we're going to give them for reviewing in February, and in March we'll invite them back to present to our board meeting, where Michael Dolson is actually chairing.
And then will it be virtual, the announcement this year, and the awarding of the prize?
Last year was virtual. It's going to be probably virtual this year too, and then I think that after the summer might be a little bit more normal than last year, but I still think that, from our perspective, next September might be the time where we go back to the office.
Yeah, no, I think that that's right. And we're looking to have our New York Bio annual meeting in September as well. Olivia, thank you. One tidbit that I would love to leave with our audience today. I had no idea until I read the Pershing Square book behind me that there's a quote in there that says, but for the Pershing Square Foundation's involvement, the High Line in New York City would not have happened. So that is your interesting tidbit, non-healthcare related tidbit of the day of the impact of the Pershing Square Foundation. Olivia, you've been an amazing guest. Thank you so much for joining us and our audience today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Can't wait to see you soon, okay?
All right.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you, Olivia, and thank you, everyone.
Awesome, thank you. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to New York Bio's virtual breakfast series. Join us every Tuesday at 9 a.m. for more discussions with leaders from across the healthcare spectrum. For more information on New York Bio, please visit us at www.newyorkbio.org.